it's all along that east coast there. So a lot of the swell, a lot of the waves come in there. And
so were you there
that was
during the
factor
earthquake tsunami?
I wasn't in Chiba though. I was in Miyazaki, and so it was a really strange sensation because I can remember it distinctly. I went to the dentist in Miyazaki. I had a dentist's appointment. I went in there at 2:30. Literally, I can remember it just, like it was yesterday. I went into the dentist at 2:30, and everything was normal in Miyazaki. And I came out of the dentist, out of the dentist's room at around about 3:00, and all of the customers and all of the staff and all of the people were all huddled around the TV, and the TV was blaring. And I was in the dentist chair, but because we're like 2,000 kilometers southwest of that area, of that coastline, I didn't feel a thing. There was literally nothing.
Not even a tremor.
But you could nothing at all. I mean, earthquakes are common here. They're really common. You start to get used to them, and you get a little bit blasé. And I've probably experienced hundreds, literally hundreds, if not thousands, in my 20 years here. But on that day, I didn't experience anything, and I came out and I saw the TV and the customers and the people waiting to go in, the staff. They were all shocked, and they were all talking, and they were all a little bit. You could sense a panic
you know
in
the
their
areas
voices
as well.
and their demeanor. That's right. And I had a lot of friends there. I had a lot of friends still there. And so I started sending messages to people, and I started getting pictures of people who'd sent stuff back. And the university where I used to work, that literally sank because it's on reclaimed land. And it sank, and the mud and silt and sludge came straight up through the campus. And it took about a year to repair that campus. And some of the buildings became derelict. So it was huge. Yeah, it was a huge thing, but I felt really strange because I didn't feel a thing, and watching it on TV, watching everything unfold, and then literally watching the tsunami come in and hit Fukushima and Ibaraki and Iwate, those places up on that coastline that I'd been to, and I knew a lot of those places really well. It was kind of shocking at the time, and that's a risk that you always face in Japan, but thankfully, I haven't experienced anything like that one in my time here. But it's
so. What was the gap
where
in
I live
between
now
with
in
you leaving?
Miyazaki.
What was the gap between you leaving to the earthquake happening?
I left in February 2009. I left Chiba, and the earthquake happened in March 2011. So I'd been down here for about 2 years.
Still, in the grand scheme of things, that 2 years could have very easily been there for 2 years on that campus at the time.
Yeah, well, there weren't any deaths or injuries on that campus, but some of the pictures were shocking. The literally concrete had split in half, parks had split in half, buildings like concrete blocks, slabs of concrete had fallen onto the ground. And because, as I said, it's reclaimed land on Tokyo Bay. It's an area called Makuhari where I live. It's where the Chiba Lotte Marines play their baseball, and there's a music festival called the Summer Sonic Festival where they have a lot of international bands come out, and it's all on reclaimed land. They've literally just filled it in, and so that means whenever you get things like earthquakes or heavy flooding, the mud rises through the concrete, the mud rises through the ground, and during that earthquake, it was about 3 feet. 3 feet of mud just rose, I wouldn't say it rose. I'd say the concrete fell down. It fell through the ground, literally.
Wow, that's crazy. So it's just a blast from the past for me. Obviously, I was quite young at the time, but I remember I was at high school at the time. And I just remember coming in the morning, and I remember the TVs were never on. We'd never get the news. Like, it'd just be first thing in the morning. Maybe right, come in, have your breakfast if you wanted to, and then you'd be off to your first lessons. But I remember very vividly that we'd all come in and we all just sat there in the canteen, everybody eyes glued to the screen, watching what's going on, just like, wow, what is Mother Nature? Right. Yeah, so it's...
I mean, it was shocking. It was shocking because I'd lived in Thailand. I lived in Thailand from 1999 to early 2001, and Thailand had that tsunami. I think it was Christmas
Mhm.
Day 2004,
I
and a
can't
lot of my
remember it, but I watched
I
I
had
remember the movie, the one with Tom Holland
yeah
was the movie, wasn't it? Impossible.
yeah yeah yeah. So that was I'm pretty sure it was around about Christmas New Year 2004, and I had a lot of friends still there from when I was working there, and I saw the tsunami happening live, and I watched places like Phuket and Koh Phi Phi and like Ao Nang down in the south near Krabi. Those places got absolutely smashed, and I'd literally spent dozens and dozens of hours on those beaches in the south of Thailand. And so when I was watching the Japan earthquake up around Fukushima and those places and the tsunami, I'd seen it all before, and it was like deja vu, just watching the march of this water come through and decimate towns and pick up cars, pick up trucks, pick up buildings, and just wash them inland. The force of nature, it's really scary. Yeah, it's quite incredible. And the funny thing is, when I got married, I was living in an area here in Miyazaki, right on the beach. Before I got married to my wife, we were living together, her and I, and we were living in a place called Aoshima, which is right on the beach. And then we got married, and we said to my wife's parents, well, now that we're married and we want to start a family, we're thinking of buying here in Aoshima. And they were both of them, the mother and the father and the grandmother and all the family were just like, no, you cannot live there. You have to, if you're going to buy somewhere, you have to buy a little bit further inland and up on a hill. And so
Well,
we
how
did.
frequently are the larger earthquakes in around that area of the world?
Um, in Japan, well, Japan's the most seismically active country in the world. So as far
Because
as
obviously,
you've got
generationally, you can kind of understand that wisdom of like don't buy near or close to the coast. But is it what? Is it every kind of 10 years on average? We say it's like every 10 years, 15, 30. I'm not sure. But I think from your point of
well,
view, wouldn't spring up
it
in your mind not to
depends.
buy there.
Well, tsunami, absolutely. I mean,
Hmm.
the the earthquakes. Most of the buildings now they have to pass certain engineering requirements and then certain strength requirements that you can't build structures unless they go through some kind of rigorous testing. So you would trust that if there was an earthquake, the buildings themselves would withstand the earthquake, but the tsunamis that follow, the threat of the tsunamis that follow, yeah, it's absolutely real. On New Year's
Hmm.
Day this year, I was down at my wife's hometown. She's from an island called Tanegashima, which is off the southern tip of the southwest of Japan. It's a tiny little island. And I was down there for New Year's with my wife and my two daughters, and we were spending time with her family, just playing. We'd just been to the shrine to do the New Year's blessings, and we came home, and it was about 2:30 in the afternoon, something like that. And again, on all our phones, we just got that massive ping, just like the alarm. And they had that huge earthquake up on Ishikawa-ken, which is not really close to where we are, but it's on the west coast of Japan, on the
Yeah.
Japan seaside, and up on the Noto Peninsula. And
How
again,
big was that
same
one?
thing. Big. It was like around about the high sevens, low eights, something like that, like about 7.9, something like that. The Fukushima one was in the nines, 9.2. So that's crazy. That's like the biggest I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
So anything above 6 is big. And in the fives, you get a good, rattle and roll. 6 is pretty big. The one in
At
Ishikawa
what
on New
stage does it
Year's
have to
Day,
be before you have to sort of take cover under tables in bathtubs?
Um, anything above 6, really. That's when your phone will ping.
Hmm.
Your phone will start pinging around 6, and you'll get announcements. Take cover. Get out of harm's way. Go to a safe area in your house or a safe area wherever you are. Anything above about 6.5. But now, since they've had Fukushima and then Ishikawa on New Year's Day, they tend to be a bit more conservative. So anything above 6, really. You'll get the big announcements, and the newscast things will start flashing, and the radio, the internet, your phone, Twitter, everything will light up saying, take care, take cover, and then you have to go and get your kids from school, or hope that the teachers will take the kids to a higher place and things like that. So yeah, it's
It's
real.
just
It's a
bizarre
real
to
threat
me.
here.
Yeah, it seems just so bizarre. I'm from the UK, and where I'm from in the UK, it's the Midlands, and we're quite high up anyway. Nowhere near any seismic lines, any tectonic plates, and fault lines. That's one. Yeah, nowhere near any fault lines. So like, I think I've experienced one very minor earthquake in my lifetime. But to have that as like a
Yeah,
constant reminder and a threat of the things that can happen, because Japan as a country, as a place, has had just, whether it be man-made disasters or natural disasters, consistently battering it over and over and over and over again for centuries. And it
yeah,
just begs a
yeah,
question, because it's obviously one of the most advanced countries, nations in the entire world, and growing and growing to where it is now. It begs the question if that's kind of inbuilt and ingrained within society and culture to be a very fast developing nation. Because otherwise, if you don't develop quickly, things are going to come and wipe it out again. It's not like you're in a very stable environment where you can have that luxury of having 200 to 300 years to build somewhere up slowly when nothing's going to happen. Because how many times now has things just been straight back to the
yeah.
beginning and
I
start over
mean,
again?
yeah, you're right. You're right in one sense, but in another sense, Japan is a weird kind of country in the sense that, um, I mean, the population's 120 million, but I would say, off the top of my head, I would say that about more than 60% of the population, probably that's conservative, 60% of the population would live in Tokyo, Yokohama, and Osaka, those regions. And so outside of those three big regions there, it's incredibly rural, and
Mm.
things have not developed at all. So like where I live, for example, all the houses are still made out of wood. The old houses, the houses built in the 50s and 60s, they're all these dilapidated wooden structures ravaged by termites, falling apart.
Wow.
So you think of Japan as this developed country with, the bullet trains and technology and robots and what have you. But as soon as you get outside of Tokyo, Osaka, Yokohama, those places, it's, there's crumbling buildings everywhere. There's vacated buildings, crumbling buildings, deserted buildings, wooden buildings that are falling apart. So when earthquakes hit, if they hit in rural regions like they did on New Year's Day, up on the Noto Peninsula up in Ishikawa, that got absolutely smashed because those buildings were just not made for
Straight,
earthquakes. They weren't made.
straight
Yeah, they
over.
just got absolutely hammered. Yeah.
Well, I find it kind of bizarre as well, though, because I obviously, again, from the UK, like every town and city is built up over hundreds of years, and you can still have the old school towns and villages with the cobble roads. And then going from that, where even in Australia, if you go out from what because I've only been here, what now, 9 months? So we've got the van, we're traveling up the East Coast. We're in Sydney for a while, started in Melbourne, now heading up to your area, Gold Coast. So from where we started, every in-between area is where, again, you've got the old school, old-fashioned wooden buildings everywhere because they haven't got to be massively durable. And you're kind of balancing it up, especially in Japan where you're on those fault lines. Is it worth spending more money to make it secure and more rigid? But if it's going to be 10, 15, 20
Um,
years between the next one, is it worth not building it up so secure and doing it cheaply and then just building it up again afterwards?
yeah, it's a good question because, like in Australia, if if you pay attention to the real estate prices in Australia, it's insane. I come from a beach. I grew up in Sydney. I grew up in a beach in Sydney called Cronulla, which is in the south of
Oh,
Sydney,
yeah.
and so that's where I grew up until I left Australia. So until I was 25, I spent my years in the Sutherland Shire, around Caringbah, Cronulla, that area. And when I was there, Cronulla, traditionally, or since until about 15, 20 years ago, Cronulla was always kind of the black sheep or the poor beach of Sydney. It was very working class. It had a very kind of anti-authority mentality. The surfers there were always on the, I guess, more aggressive, not as polished as surfers from the city beaches like Bondi or the northern beaches like Narrabeen, Manly, those places. Sydney,
Yeah.
Cronulla was always a poorer area of Sydney. Cronulla itself, not the Shire, but the Cronulla. But now, I mean, literally, the median house price in Cronulla is $3 million. That's the median.
Ridiculous.
It's just
It's
insane
ridiculous.
that, I couldn't go back to Cronulla even if I wanted to. My mum left in, I think, 2001. I think she moved from Cronulla up to the Gold Coast. But to see the price from where I was in the 1980s and 1990s to where Cronulla and where Sydney is now, it's insane. But getting back to your question is that when you invest in your own home and when you add things to your own home, you add a deck, you add a pool, you add a backyard porch, you add a nice front garden, you do some landscape gardening, etc., it continually adds $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 to the value of your house, so that the more you put in, the more you get out when you sell it. So there's a vested interest in investing in your own home and investing in the quality of your home. But in Japan, it doesn't exist. That doesn't exist at all.
Really?
So the only thing that's of value in Japan is the land. Literally the land. Not even the structure that's built on top of the land is meaningless. So when you buy somewhere in Japan, you're buying that land, and whatever happens to the structure that's on that land in the future, it's basically irrelevant. The new person who comes in, they might buy that land and say, well, I like the land, and then they'll look at your house and say, wow, that's not the house that I want, and they'll just knock it down and they'll build again.
Well, that's what's happening a lot all around the New South Wales area. A lot. I have a theory of this anyway, and I'm by no means any investment expert, but I'll look into it anyway because it's something I want to get started in sooner rather than later. And I've heard about things, especially in Japan previously, where all of the properties in the suburbs area and these sort of more well-off areas around Tokyo and the major cities all rose and rose and rose because they were all treated as those investment properties when they had that boom. And everyone was buying up these up and up and up. But then it got very quickly to a point where nobody could afford it. And all of these new builds and ones that are bought off plan, they couldn't be sold to anyone anyway because of that. So that led to their own crash, where Australia, on the other hand, has been very, very lucky never to have had a crash. But if the price is going up and up and up now, where sooner or later, over the next 20, 30 years, the demographic is going to be so high, and nobody who's coming into the workforce and sort of getting on their own feet would be able to afford it at all. Because it's so interesting for me going from, you say, obviously, the next 10 years maybe, whenever it might be, even now.
I don't even think it's 20 to 30 years. Yeah, I think it's now. I think, like I'm 50 now, and my generation
And look at Dave at 35.
got in at the right time. So yeah, so I mean, like my friends, they were lucky enough to buy in Cronulla, and so they bought houses at, say, 300,000, 400,000, something like that. And those houses are now worth 2.5 million, 3 million, something like that. And they can pass those houses down to their kids, right? But if you're a kid or not necessarily a kid, if you're between 15, 20, 25, something like that, and then you're trying to buy a place in Cronulla now at $3 million, I mean, it's impossible. The banks want 20% deposit. Well, what's 20% of $3 million? That's like 600,000. That's just the deposit to get a bank loan.
Not happening.
And then you've got to pay 2.4 million at 6% or whatever. It's impossible, literally impossible. So if you're a kid of a parent who's my age, my friends have all bought in Cronulla, and they were lucky to get in when they did, and they can pass them down to their kids. But if you're looking to get into somewhere like Cronulla, no chance. There's absolutely no chance you could buy somewhere at $3 million with a 600,000 deposit. Um, and when going back to Tokyo, to talking, where you're talking about Australia and Tokyo and the prices, the problem with both of those places, Australia and Tokyo specifically, it's simple supply and demand. Australia, you don't have the space to build because of various reasons, various political reasons and landscape reasons. And in Tokyo, you also don't have the space to build further. And the problem is that through government policy and through different things over time, is that everyone leaves rural areas in Japan and they all flock to the cities. They all move to Tokyo. They all move to Osaka. They all move to Fukuoka. And so in the end, you've just got this oversupply of people who are looking for somewhere to live, and there's nowhere to live. And of course, supply and demand rules that if there's an undersupply of a certain resource, then that the price of it just goes up and up and up. And so that's what happens in Tokyo. The price is just going up and up and up because there aren't enough places to live for all the people going in. But on the converse of that, the opposite of that is somewhere like where I live. So I bought a 4-bedroom, 2-story house, huge block of land, 5 minutes from the beach. Absolute paradise for me. Like I couldn't be happier. I couldn't have bought a better place. But no one wants to live here. No one's looking to come here. The price of property hasn't moved in something like 40 years. Yeah, it's great. It's absolutely wonderful. But in terms of putting money in to invest and putting money in to make money from your home, it doesn't really exist outside of Tokyo or Osaka. So back to your question regarding building a better home for earthquakes or building a better home for protection and what have you. It honestly depends on how long you see yourself being in the home that you're occupying at that moment. So if you don't see yourself being there for another 5 years or another 10 years and you plan to go elsewhere in Japan or back to your home country or whatever, it makes no sense whatsoever to put any money into your home because you're not going to get anything out of it. Because the people who buy the land, they don't care about your home. They don't care if you put a new deck in and put new gardening in and put new pebbles on that old weedy area, because they'll knock it down anyway and they'll put in their own home. So
it can be very interesting to see how it
goes with the.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see how it goes with the current sort of declining population. How much of an issue is the declining population in Japan at the moment?
Huge. I mean, my wife comes from an island called Tanegashima, as I said before, which is just off the southern tip of the island of Kyushu. And the population of the island is 40,000. My wife's parents, my wife's family is about 5 generations deep there. And I think the last census that was done, I think about 55% of people are over 50 on that island. And there are some places when we go home to my wife's home, when we go back there are some places where I can go 2 or 3 days without seeing anyone under 50 years old.
Wow.
And even at my wife's home, her father's 63 now and he's retired. Mandatory retirement at 60 on the island there, and they have a huge swathes of farmland, and so in her home they've got tractors, they've got like rice combines, they've got all these other pieces of machinery that are used on the fields for farming. But when he finally when his body packs it in and he's unable to continue working on the farmlands, who's going to take all that over? Because the son has moved to Tokyo, my wife lives here in Miyazaki, and her younger sister lives in Hiroshima. So none of the children are going to go back to Tanegashima to take over the farmlands. The father is too old, and there's no younger generations coming through. So what happens to that land? Like literally, it's a paradise island. But I think within 40 to 50 years, I say with my wife, yeah, what happens? I say to my wife all the time, what is going to happen to Tanegashima?
Well, I've seen videos now. There's a great video. So there's a great video on YouTube by a channel called Yes Theory. And I don't know if you've seen it at all. but they went over to one of these effectively abandoned islands in Japan. I'm not sure what it was called. I can't remember, but they were going round where, again, there was very, very, very few people there, where everyone effectively just up and left. And there was no real reason for it, where they walked through a hotel, like it was supposed to be a luxury hotel. It was like a holiday home kind of area. And the hotel, the ceilings had fallen in with moles, with rainfall coming in. It's got water features, and everything was just abandoned. Nobody wanted to buy it. Nobody wanted to be there anymore for no reason. It wasn't a major earthquake. There wasn't natural disaster. There was food aplenty. It wasn't massively overpriced. It was just the receding population or the migrating population towards the major cities. It just left it completely barren. And that was about 10, 15, 20 years ago now. So where you can go now and it almost looks like it's a post-apocalyptic world. Because there's no one there. And it
Yeah,
just looks
yeah.
like it's just being
No,
left.
I mean,
Nature's reclaimed it.
it's common. It's really common, because you have a declining population, which obviously means, fewer babies are being born, so fewer young people are coming through. But what intensifies that, or what brings it even more into stark focus, is that what is left of the population is all moving to the city hubs. So they're all gravitating to Tokyo, to Osaka, to Yokohama. And so you've got populations in the rural areas that are not replenishing, and the population, or the people that are there, are all leaving anyway because they can't get work. There's no work available outside of the big cities of, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, Fukuoka, those places. So all of these rural areas, they're not getting the babies being born, and they're losing work eligible people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, because they're all leaving for the cities. And so you get these places that are literally, as you said, they just get abandoned. You've got houses everywhere, even where I live. You go for a drive. You go for a drive downtown. You go for a drive down the coast, and along the roads, all along the roads, you just see abandoned places everywhere. Literally, no, all shuttered, boarded, taped over, or falling apart, and no one will do anything with them because they might be in ideal areas as far as we can see, as from a Western's perspective, overlooking the ocean, beautiful location, clean, pure air, etc. But you need an income. You need money. If you're going to bring a family, you're going to bring up children, you need something to subsist upon. And in these rural areas, businesses are closing because people are leaving, and because the population's declining. And so everything's becoming concentrated in these big cities. And that means the price of these big cities goes up. And these rural places all across Japan are just disappearing, literally, week by week, month by month. They're slowly disappearing into what will be in 50, 60 years, extinction, basically.
Well, that's the fear. I feel like that fear itself of people seeing that happening from their family homes, their grandparents' homes, their parents' homes, those areas where if they've gone off to go to university at a bigger city, they've seen what's happened elsewhere, they can see the same signs happening where they are. It's just got to cause that mass panic and like people literally fleeing to the cities, not because they necessarily want to live there because it's their best lifestyle or whatever. It's just if they don't, they'll get left behind in terms of financially, and then they're not going to be able to afford a place either. Or if they did, that fear of that place going under and just again going extinct, like you say. I mean, is that? You mentioned about that island where your partner's parents are from having a mandatory retirement at 60. Is that quite common? Is that in a lot of areas, or?
Oh, I might have misspoken there. I mean, where her father worked was a mandatory retirement at 60, not the entire island.
Right. Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense.
Mandatory retirement.
Yeah. Okay.
Mandatory retirement at 60 is quite common in Japan, though.
Like kind of more physical labor roles and jobs.
Yeah.
I imagine.
So even at the university where I work, you work until 60, and then between 60 and 65, then you get your pay docked by 20%, but you also get reduced 20% working hours. So 60 across a lot of Japan is still a number whereby people are retiring, and they get something called taishokukin, which is like the big lump sum payout. So you put in your 20,000 yen or 30,000 yen a month across the 20, 30, 40 years of your working life, and then you finish at 60 and you get your big lump sum of taishokukin. And then if you want to continue working, 61, 62, up until 68, 70, whatever, then you're entitled to keep working. But in a lot of places, you'll be on reduced hours and reduced pay. That's very common.
I mean, that's sure. I mean, it's might be very common, and to a lot of people who work those 40, 50 hour per week jobs in a busy, rushing around city, like it sounds actually quite a luxury to be able to have that. But at the same time, does that not rob you of your choice? Because I mean, a lot of people live for their work. The people who rise to the top of their area, especially in roles like yourself, being within education, you get to those ages, you might be coming towards your most accoladed years and your prime, effectively, where you don't necessarily want to be winding it down, but you're kind of being pushed towards it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of court cases recently from Japanese people and from foreign people saying, this is not right. You can't mandate at the age of 60 that I suddenly get a 20% pay cut, albeit with 20% reduced working hours. So it's commensurate, my working hours and my pay going down, but I'm 60 years old. Why is this part of labor law? And people have challenged it, both foreigners and Japanese, and so it's starting to
surely it doesn't even make sense.
It
doesn't even make sense from a competitive standpoint, though, because in a lot of areas there's hyper competition within industries, within one business, for one role and one job. And if there's somebody who's, say, got 20 years on you, and they are in a position where they can put the extra hours in for a project versus you, where you've got the experience but you're limited, there's either two things going to happen. They're either going to choose a younger person because of the extra work they can put into it and the extra man hours, or they're going to choose the older person and they're going to end up putting in those hours anyway just so they can keep up. And there's that pay cut, because regardless of how many hours you're allowed to work, you go home, you can log onto your laptop, and it's not like you have to be in the office for it.
I think Japan.
That's frustrating me. I'm not even there.
Country. Japan's a very conservative country, which means change is very, very slow. And I think that these labor laws have been in place since the times whereby someone started working at a company like Toyota or Mazda or Panasonic, one of the big companies. They started working there at 22 years old, something like that. And then they just worked at that same company until they retired 38 years, 40 years later at 60. And so Japan's system of payment is based on age. It's not based on skill or qualification or what you've achieved in the past. It's literally based on, you're 24, where you get more than a 22-year-old. Oh, you're married, where you get more than a single person. You've got 3 kids, you get more than a person with 1 kid. And so they have all these systems in place where everything is based on age. And so by the time you get to 60, in the olden days of Japan, before the declining population and before, the situation that we find ourselves in with the world right now, post-pandemic and what have you, I think that by the time you got to 60, your pay was so high and your taishokukin, the pension that you'd paid into, was so high as well that they could afford to let 60-year-old people go, and 60-year-old people could live comfortably on all of the pay rises they'd got and the pension that they'd received from all the money that they'd put in over the years. And it was beneficial to the company as well, because the company could get rid of a 60-year-old and then bring in a replacement 22-year-old and then groom that person for the next 40 years in a similar position. And so because you have these 60-year-olds who are earning so much money, by getting them out, it was profitable to get rid of the old people and bring the young people in. And so it was this kind of cycle of economic reality or pragmatism, I suppose. But now, post-pandemic, in the era that we live in, where with declining population and a lack of young people coming through to replace the older people, it's a system that doesn't really work anymore. But because Japan is so conservative and so slow to change, they haven't really addressed it with through labor laws and things like that. But now people are starting to say, hang on, this doesn't make sense, economically, financially, from sociologically, it doesn't make any sense. And now people are starting to challenge it. But as we stand, right now, it still is the status quo.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I can see the remnants of what would have been a great system throughout a industrial revolution, an industrious era where you would get that experience and it's fair, it kept everyone happy, less arguments within an organization because you would get better and you sustain that whole place in one career. But with the rate at which technology advances now, and a lot of the big top 10, top 20, top 50 companies in Japan being technological, and that battle between them and the rest of the world, or Japan and the rest of the world, and everyone against themselves, with that again, that increasing speed, the increasing technology, it just doesn't quite work anymore. Where now somebody who comes in at 20 years old has got a whole different level of experience or a completely new arena than somebody who's been there 20, 30 years. Like, cars changed
Well,
very little for the
one
past
of the
50 to
biggest
100
problems.
years, but now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the bigger problems now is that younger people in Japan, especially younger people, are coming into the workforce and they're seeing that it's not a meritocracy. Regardless of their qualifications, their skills, their understanding, their knowledge, they're getting placed into trainee positions or low level positions simply because they're 22 and not 32. And they're having to answer to 30-year-old, 40-year-old people who might not be as qualified as they are, or might not be as knowledgeable, or have as innovative
And they might be
ideas. And so
complacent.
a lot of the younger people, yeah, and a lot of the younger people in the UK, Australia, across the world, they're saying no. I don't want to go into these big companies anymore. And they want to be, they want to do their own thing. They want to be freelancers. They want to be content creators. They want to be their own bosses. They want to be the masters of whatever they're producing rather than having to work for a boss or a company who's paying them a pittance, regardless of how much they know or whatever they can bring to that company. They're all saying no. And so this is a big problem again, is that of the younger generations that are available to work, you're getting a higher than ever proportional percentage of those younger generations saying, no, I don't want to go into these big companies. And so they're getting rid of these people at 60, 65 or whatever. And you've got fewer people because of the declining population, but you've also got fewer people because these younger kids are saying, no, I don't want this. This is not my life. I don't want to be in this company at 22 years old getting a pittance compared with that bloke who's 32, who's less knowledgeable and less skillful than I am. And so the companies in Japan are in this, state of flux, I guess, because they're losing their experienced people and they're not getting the younger people coming in. They don't know what to do. And so they're trying to implement changes. But the problem is that the older generations, the people who are 50 and 60, who had to go through all those years of 20, 30, 40 of being underpaid, undervalued, underrespected, now they're at the top of the summit at 50 or 60. They're saying, well, hey, this is my time. I don't want to sacrifice what's rightfully mine that I've had to work for the last 20, 30 years in order to help accommodate these 20 and 30-year-olds coming through, even if they are more knowledgeable, skillful, or well-equipped than I am.
I mean, I can imagine even through a family dynamic of a very Western kind of view of a lot of Eastern nations being parents being very much education based and go to school, go to university, work hard, get yourself a good job, support the family. Where now the family dynamics and the arguments that I can imagine going on at this point being, again, as you say, the new generation coming through and saying, I don't want to do that anymore. It might have worked for you, mum, dad, but it doesn't work for me with what they can see from the wider world, from media, from the internet, from technology, from the issues that they can see that it's causing in a nation where, as you say, being so conservative and slow to change, when you're younger, you just come you just come out of education, you're eager, you're ready, you've got that fire in your belly, ready to go, and you want to make the most of that. And it's just can cause
Absolutely.
so many issues. What's the general
Yeah, yeah.
consensus that you get within this generation at the universities being in a prime position to see where these movements are going?
I think that to be totally honest with you, I think that the internet, the social media landscape has changed the perspective of younger people. You know, people who are 18, 19, 20, 21, whatever. They're seeing, I mean, this is not just Japan, this is the world, is Australia, UK, wherever. I think they're seeing people on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok or whatever. They're seeing people making $10,000 a month, $20,000 a month, $30,000 a month, whatever, through content creation and through being their own bosses and through living in their own apartments or living in their own van or traveling across the world doing their own videos and what have you, and people seeing the possibilities out there versus going to a company where they're undervalued because of their age. They have to sit in a suit and tie. They have to listen to older people telling them what to do. They have to go and make them green tea and get them cookies every morning. And they weigh those options up. And even if they go to a company where they might have the opportunity to work for the next 40 years, which would have been wonderful for their parents or their grandparents, they're still watching YouTube or listening to podcasts or looking at TikTok in their 5-minute breaks or their 10-minute breaks, and they're seeing what the high earners and the high level the highly followed people, what they're making and what the possibilities are. And I think there's just a general lack of enthusiasm to work for companies across the world now, especially Japan. I think Japan's no different from anywhere else. But even more so because Japan was always a place where you got a job at the one company and you stayed with that company and you worked at that company until you were 60 and you got your golden handshake, you got your little watch, you got your Taishoku
respect you
handout.
for it.
And yeah, and that's right, and your family respected you. There's Hiroshi. He's done 40 years at Panasonic. Wonderful, bravo. But now the younger people are saying, you know what? That I don't want to do that. I don't want to work at Panasonic for the next 40 years. I got this bloke across the road who's earning $10,000 a month making gaming videos, something like that, or someone's traveling around the world surfing exotic breaks, making $3,000 a month. It might not even be the high-level earners at $10,000 a month. It might even be someone earning,
lifestyle.
$1,500 a month. That's right. Someone earning $1,500 a month versus $2,000 a month sitting in a tiny little cubicle for 12 hours a day. People will take the $500 sacrifice and live the good life. And those opportunities are there for people these days. And, young Japanese are no different. I think that they see the world the way that UK people see the world and Australian people see the world. I mean, even you right now, you're traveling around Australia, you're doing podcasts, I guess you're sitting in a van right now.
Yep. We're currently sitting a bit near Nelson's Bay up from Newcastle, watching the sunset.
There you go, just up the coast. This is what people want to do. That's what I did. I didn't want to live that life of a company person. So when I went to university, I got a Bachelor of Arts at Sydney University. And in Australia, we call a BA, it's a good degree, but we call a BA a bugger all. Because
I've not heard that
it doesn't really equip you for anything, right?
Well, not anymore,
we call it a bugger all degree. Yeah, and so after that, I thought to myself, well, I love traveling. I'm not really a mathematics, science, STEM, what they call STEM these days. I'm not really a STEM person. I'm more a creative person, a writer, a writing person, social sciences, humanities. What can I do with my Bachelor of Arts? What can I do with that can provide me a career whereby I can combine traveling and working? So then after I had my BA, I thought, well, okay, I'll do a Master of Education and I'll major in, teaching English, teach TESOL. And so that's what I did. I got my master's in teaching second languages, and then I left. I went to Samoa, I went to Thailand, and then that's it. I've spent the last 25 years in Asia. But I think the younger generations are doing the same kind of thing. looking beyond working in a company, working in the same building for 30 years. They're looking at what skills can I use now that are available to me to create the kind of lifestyle that provides money and the life that I want, rather than just the money or just the lifestyle. I think, people are trying to work out how they can do both.
Yes. I mean, I see this from a very privileged position now. I keep seeing you with your red wine, and I really want a glass. I have to grab one afterwards. I see this from a
I'm
privileged
going
position here
slowly
now, where
through.
there's a definite split between those who are raised by people like yourself, who have been instilled in them that joy of doing what you want, working hard for what you want because it's what you want, and you get your own sense of pride and honor through that, whether you make millions or not, whether you're in a big house, small house, in the city, by the beach, wherever you might be. Living a life on your own accord, by your own choice, is a luxury enough, and it's a reward enough to warrant whatever it is that you choose to do. There's people who grew up, like myself, growing up with a parent or parents who admired that kind of courage in people to go out and do that, knowing full well there's no guarantee life when you got a degree at university or whatnot, and you were able to get a job and you had that career and you had that progression. It's a very valiant thing. However, there's a lot of people growing up in this generation now and seeing, because of people like yourself raising kids like themselves in their image, the rest of the world now is seeing what those people have been allowed to go out and do, when they're allowed to flourish, when they're allowed to be free, when they make their own mistakes. Yes, the negative side being, obviously, you don't see all the negative. You don't see the ones who didn't complete it, or who didn't succeed, who gave up too early. And then they might have to start their career at a much lower or a much later date, and it takes them longer. However, what you do see is the people who do make it work, the ones who took the risks and it paid off. And all that talk which we're getting now it's not about that success so much as it's about that journey. And that works for me massively, because I can sleep very well at night thinking, heck, this whole thing might not work. This thing might take 20 years. It might take 30 years. The internet might explode and whatever, and it doesn't happen. But I've enjoyed doing it, and that struggle makes it worthwhile. But now for a whole generation to be seeing that and having very similar ideas, for me, it's great, but it's also a little bit scary. It's a little bit scary because this golden era for technology and careers online, finding its feet of where it is, and people being able to do whatever they want and make a living out of it, I do fear that may lead to a seismic decline in the next 10, 20 years, when only the top 15, 20% of people succeeded and the rest didn't. Because if you got a job at Toyota, in 10, 15, 20 years, you're still going to be at a certain level and you're going to have all this backing, and you would have made peace with that and you could have your holidays, your family, your home, all the things you would want for a great life. And the downside, or the major upside being that's very, very risk-free. That's my fear, that the rest of the world might find themselves in that decline because of that.
I mean, I agree with everything you say. The one thing that I do think that has not changed over time, and it will never change, regardless of technology, regardless of the internet, regardless of whatever way society turns and whatever twists and turns the economics of the world take, I think one thing that will never change is that whatever you do, whether it's working for Toyota or working online as a content creator or working on YouTube or working in whatever field, hard work. It takes hard work. You need to work hard to be a success. And you just talked about the 15% or the 20% who will succeed, and the 75 or 80% who won't succeed. And it's the same. It doesn't matter if you're a content creator on YouTube, or you're a podcaster, or you're a sock manufacturer in the clothing industry. if you work harder than your competitors, or you work harder than your rivals, and you learn, and you go to school, well, not necessarily formal school or formal education, but you learn from people, you study other people in the industry, you study other successful people. That will always help you. You can't be successful. And this is from me as a 50-year-old man looking and saying, well, these are my experiences. But I mean, you met me, you contacted me because you read something that I wrote through Medium, right? You read what I wrote online. And so I've been writing for a long time. I've been writing for 15 years. And now I would say that I am at a stage with my writing and my freelancing on various platforms, with photography writing on Medium, writing for different freelance sites in Japan and elsewhere. I'm pretty successful. I've got a fair number of followers, I've got a fair number of readers, and I've got a fairly good second income coming. But that's taken a long time. I had a lot of rejections. I had a lot of no's. I had a lot of people saying, you need to work on this in your writing. You need to work on that in your writing. Your writing lacks this. Your writing lacks that. And I had to go back and I had to hone it and fix it and talk to people. And I ended up doing a master's in creative writing. I started that at the age of 46, something like that. And so now my writing is gaining some attention. And people might say, well, hey, this guy's come from nowhere. But I haven't. I've been writing for a long, long, long time. And yes, I'm in the gig economy with Medium. And yes, I'm getting paid a handsome second income for my writing in various places. But it's taken a long, long time. And so it doesn't matter if you're a YouTuber or you're a regular factory worker. Hard work is what you need, and people in the Premier League. My parents are from England. My mum comes from the Wirral and my dad comes from London, and they both left England to move to Australia. So I'm the only Australian in the family. My parents still British citizens with British passports. My entire family, aunties, cousins, grandparents, etc., they all live in England. And so I learned from my parents that you got to work hard. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You're a podcaster, you're a this, you're a that. You've got to put the hours in. You've got to get better at what you do. And as soon as you get better than your competitors, then that's when the rewards will follow. And so I think that will never change. The economic landscape or the employment landscape or the way of making money landscape will change for individuals over the years, depending on what's happening. But I think hard work and graft, I think that it's boring and it might not sound very fashionable, and it might sound like, an older generation saying, oh, work hard, but it's true. Some things don't change. It really is true.
So I'm a PT by trade, personal trainer, and you can never, ever, ever beat sets and reps. Sets and reps, sets and reps. And like you were saying, it seems like it's all come all of a sudden for yourself, but it's with every overnight success, there is a long, long time in the making. It's a case of whenever you do anything, it hasn't taken the length of that project to create it. It's taken a lifetime to get you to a position to be able to create that. So and for me and you speaking with the same mindset, that works so well. But I can't help but shake the feeling, knowing some of the people I know, knowing some of my best friends who I know who want to do or try these things. I know that there's also people out there who won't do that. There's people out there who won't put in that hard work, and they've not had, as bad as it sounds, they've not had a bad enough life to shape them into action, and that realization of hard work always prevails.
I think also that you have to understand, not you, I mean everyone, all of your listeners and everyone in the world, people have to understand that, but for a very, very few, for a tiny, tiny percentage of people, success never happens instantly. I think people are so used to, with social media and with various, the internet and what have you, people are so used to instant gratification, instant happiness, instant dopamine hits, that they expect that, well, okay, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to become a freelance writer. I expect to make $5,000 from my first article. I'm just going to write something online. People are going to love it. I'm going to make $5,000. I'm set. My life on Sunday was crap. My life on Monday, I'm a new person. And I'm going to write all about it. And I'm going to post it on Instagram. I'm going to be a TikToker and people are going to love me. And then, they do something and, like I've got some articles on Medium now that have been read 250,000 times. That's viral by any metric. But when I started, I've also got some articles that were read 2 times. I've got 2 views on some articles and 5 views when I first began that went nowhere. And I thought, well, those were pretty good. Why am I not getting any traction here? Why is no one looking at my stuff? And at that time, you can either say, well, okay, I'm going to give up. Or you can say, well, I'm going to back myself here and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work out what I need to do. I'm going to put in the effort to keep going. I might be at 2 views now, but that becomes 20 views. And then soon that becomes 200 views. And then that becomes 2,000 views. And all of a sudden you're at 20,000 views earning money and people want to talk to you. And people are saying, wow, you're really doing well. But not so long ago, you were at a time when it was only 2 views. And it needs persistence and perseverance. And I think that comes down to hard work and being able to say that I'm in this for the long haul. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whatever the profession is. It doesn't matter whether it's working online in the gig economy or working for a company trying to build some kind of, a hardware business or services business. You got to work hard. There's no shortcuts to success. There really isn't.
Without doubt. And I've been through phases myself where, for me, when you take the eye off the ball, and that's when you're all looking at success. And the most success I've ever had for anything is when I've completely disregarded success and just purely enjoyed doing it. And that's something a lot of people look for in those kind of roles now. Like we were mentioning, instead of going into a career where the success is when you are earning, say, $100,000 or $200,000, and you've got the house, you've got the boats, the pool, the kids, and that's success. And anything short of that's a failure. And that kind of mindset will just beat at you nonstop, over and over and over again. But I know for a fact, like you're just saying, if you can slog it for the long haul and you can say, right, I'm in this, you can keep going, and anyone can keep going. And if you're enjoying not necessarily every part of it day to day, because there's the slogs or struggles, the things you enjoy about the role, there's things you don't enjoy about the role. I'm sure as a writer yourself, sitting there and having to either churn out some pages or trying to battle through writer's block, or life's kind of simmering at the boil at the moment, but you've got to kind of focus on this, that those aren't necessarily enjoyable times. But when you have that enjoyable moments, or those enjoyable moments which you can do each day, and you kind of get that sense and that remembrance of why you started, what you were doing, and that's going to prevail, and that's what keeps you coming back. It's what keeps you going over and over and over again, day after day, week after week, year after year. Before you know it, you're 20 years in, and who cares if 10 people are still watching, or if there's 100,000 people or 1 million people? Like, you're doing it now because it's part of your routine. You love doing it. It was almost like that. What was the saying? It was like, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Yeah, I mean, I will be honest. I don't want to deceive you or anyone else. I am a little bit mercenary in that I won't put time into something that I don't think will give me financial rewards. Because, I mean, at my age, I'm 51 now. I just turned 51. I've got 2 young daughters. I've got a full-time job at university. I've got a wife. I love surfing. I love photography. They are parts of my life that I won't give up. And so they take my time. So if I'm going to dedicate my time to something else where I want it to be a second income, or I want it to be something that could financially provide for myself or my family or whatever, I have to be confident that there is an opportunity there for me. Now, that doesn't mean that for other people, I'm not telling anyone what to do. But I would say that you have to have a look somewhere along the line at, 6 months in, 12 months in, 18 months in, 24 months in, whatever. You have to look at it and say, well, is there an opportunity for me to scale this? Is there an opportunity for me to grow, not just for me as a person, but financially? Because whatever you're doing time-wise into something that's not proving financially viable is something that you're taking time away from something that could be financially viable. So, you might be writing, let's just say, for example, you might be writing for website A, and website A is not really going where you want it to go. And there's an opportunity to write for website B, but you don't take website B because you want to stick with website A. But the more you write for website A, the more you cannot write for website B, right? So somewhere along the line, you've got to say, well, you know what? Website A is not doing it for me. It's not going up. It's not paying me. The time that I'm putting in is not giving me what I believe I deserve. And you have to cut ties. Sometime you have to go, well, hang on, I'm going to go to website B here. And I think that I'm really strict with myself in that sense, that I won't put time into something that I don't believe can be beneficial to me. I don't do things purely, and this is from someone who's 51 years old, mind you, so please take that into account. I won't do things purely for intrinsic motivation. There has to be intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. I have to be getting something out of it. And so with Medium, yeah, I mean, I think when you're doing something, when you're creating something, when you're producing something, for me, I can't sit down in front of my computer and write, a 2,000 word essay or a 2,000 word piece and put my photography with it, or put my artistic creations on it, if I know right now that 3 people are going to read it and I'm going to get no money from it. I just can't do that. Right now, maybe when I was 30 years old, I could, but I've been writing for a long, long time. And so where I am right now, if someone came to me and said, hey, look, I've got an opportunity for you to write something, it could be something in 10 years, but right now we can't give you anything, then I wouldn't be rude, but I would say, thanks, but no thanks. Right now where I am in my writing career is I need to be getting paid for the time I'm putting in. And I think that you need to understand in yourself, if it's something that you love, then keep doing it. But if you are going to keep doing it, you do need to find a way at some point of thinking, this has to make money for me. It can't just be the love, week after week, month after month, year after year, if you're not getting anything out of it, And
I think 100%. I mean, if you're not getting anything out of it after so long, you make those adjustments and realize, especially with how the media kind of work, well, social media, posting content, whatever, it kind of works at the moment. If you're not getting anything financial out of it, the likelihood is you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean you have to stop. It doesn't mean you have to completely neglect every sort of intrinsic value you have when you're doing the work. You've just got to kind of reassess and think, right, how can I package this differently? How can I tweak what's going on? It's having that growth mindset and thinking, oh, I'm not a failure because I'm not making loads of money from this. But there is a way, a very clear, the path has been trodden multiple times over now by many people, that if you can't take a step back and put on your business head and get the whiteboard out and assess those areas and look at those metrics, that analytics, and see, right, what can I do in a different way to kind of ensure that growth and that financial backing from it, then you eventually, that again, as you say, that motivation runs out. Going off the pure love and the thrill of things, it does run out eventually when it comes to things, when you, not necessarily for everything, but when you know that there is a way and a path for that and you're not getting it. I mean, there's a lot of cynical thoughts and that voice people have in their head of that just beats them up over and over and over. And if you can get past that stage, take your checkpoints, give yourself those time limits, treat it like a business. Even if you're not making money, treat it like a business. Know what you need to do, how you're going to grow it.
Yeah, you are your product. If you're a content creator, if you're creating content and producing content and giving something of yourself for people, then you are your product. And you are what you are producing. And so to give a specific example of what you're talking about right now is with Medium. With Medium, when you write, the way that you get paid on Medium, you get paid per reads. And a read is classified as someone staying on your article for 30 seconds or more. And they have tracking software, etc., etc., etc. So as long as someone stays on your story or article, whatever you want to call it, as long as someone stays on your article for 30 seconds, then that will be classified as a read, and then you will be paid for that person. So what that means is, for me as a writer, I have to whack someone between the eyes straight away. For those first 30 seconds, I have to put everything into keeping that person on the screen, keep that person reading word after word, sentence after sentence for at least 30 seconds. And then after 30 seconds, as cynical as it may sound, I might put a whole load of gunk for the next 2 minutes of my writing. But as long as I've kept that person there for the first 30 seconds, then I'm getting paid. So what does that mean in a practical sense? Well, that means, okay, my headline has to be good. Okay, my headline has to be the thing that gets someone. Then after my headline, my lead image has to be captivating. So my headline has to be good. My lead image has to be good. My intro, so then you get a little, I think it's like a 60-word blurb that you get under your lead image. So you get something like that. And then you get your first paragraph. So basically, I have to take care of my headline, my lead image, my 60-word blurb, and then my first paragraph. That's all I care about. And I go over those things again and again and again. I'll send them to friends, and I'll say, is this interesting? Does this get you? Is this boring? And after I get feedback, or after I get, a few different opinions from different people, then from there, then I'll just write my article. I'll write it the way I want it, how it feels good to me. But those first 4 things, I'm hypercritical. I'm absolutely, businessman-like. It's not fun. It's not entertainment. It's not content creation. It's business for me. Are these hitting people between the eyes and giving them some kind of shock value or some kind of interest value that makes them stay on the page for 30 seconds? Because 30 seconds is what I need from them to give me a read, which gives me a payment. And so that's how you have to become practical, and how you have to assess what you're doing in terms of your production of content.
Yeah, well, any content creator now has that kind of lens on any media they consume and anything they create. Because a great piece of advice I heard was, your core message, the thing that you want to portray or the thing that you want to say, has to have value for you to want to do it. But in terms of how you wrap that up, how you wrap that package up, make it look as pretty as fucking possible, so that when someone's there trying to pick which present they want to pick from underneath the tree, it is yours. Once they've opened it and they've got through the first bit, and then that's okay, now it's your message. To wrap it up, however, is palatable, consumable, keeps people's attention, keeps them going, keeps them coming back. Because otherwise, you're not going to have that in the first place. No one's going to read it. No one's going to see it. It's going to prevent you, and it's going to take away from your own motivation from carrying on that in the future as well. And I think that's with whether you be a writer, a video creator, a podcaster, a YouTube, whatever it is that you do, you've got to have that. And for the longest time, people have known that anyway. Like throughout the history of media, going back into the 50s and before, you got to have the look. You've got to have the look for it. If you don't have the look, you're not going to get on TV. You're on the radio, you've got to have the voice. You've got to have the voice for it. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what you say, people aren't going to click into it. But now there's so many ways, especially with analytics, how they work at the moment, where you can see the drop-off, you can see the timings, you can see what works and what doesn't, and you can split test that from one to the next. You can very clearly now look at what you're doing and, like a scientist, go through it bit by bit, what works, what doesn't work, what you need to say. And it's things that authors especially, having that ability to take a long time or as much time as they want of what they produce themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think
often very good at.
For a novelist, for example, if you're writing a novel, a novel tends to be 350 to 400 pages. you can work your way into a novel. But even the best novels, you go and look at the best novels, and sometimes you don't even realize. But from page one, they're just like bang, whack. They hit you, and you're straight in. Even like The Beach. Where I went to Thailand in 2000, and that was when was Alex Garner, I think, wrote The Beach, and it was huge. It was massive, and when I picked it up and I read it at the first time, and I was like, yeah, because I was in Thailand, it was set in Koh Phi Phi, and people were like, oh, The Beach and Leonardo DiCaprio. But you look at that book, and from the first page almost, he walks into a backpackers hostel in Bangkok, and he gets given a map. Almost from page one, this guy gets a map, and all of a sudden you're in. Okay, this guy's got a map. He's going to a secret island in the
You're
south
involved.
of Thailand with backpackers and Koh Phangan and the full moon parties, and here we go. This is on. He doesn't say, oh, well, I'm here at Heathrow now, and I'm just packing my bags, and I'm checking the board, and I'm going to go and have a beer, and I think this is going to be a great holiday in Thailand, and it's really good, and I'm really looking forward to it, but I'm sad to say
No,
goodbye to
you're
my
in.
dog.
You're involved.
That's right. Bang, you're straight in. And it's the same with the internet now, with YouTube videos or with podcasts or with writing on Medium or whatever. You need to be straight in. Otherwise, the person will click off. They'll be like, oh, what's this person doing? I can't be bothered. I don't want to listen. I don't want to read. I need to. People are so selfish and so self-absorbed these days that they want to know, what's in this for me? What can I get from this? How is this going to entertain me? How is this going to teach me? How is this going to educate me? And how is this going to enlighten me in some way or brighten my day? And it has to be like, bang, you've got to get them. And I think that in this world that we live in now, where we're fighting for attention so much, what you do in the first 30 seconds or the first minute of whatever you're producing for people is it's so important. It's 100% absolutely the most vital thing. You might make mistakes through the middle of what you do or at the end of what you do, but they're forgivable. If you make mistakes in the way that you lead into something in the first, your headline or your lead picture or your first paragraph or what, that's unforgivable, because people click off and they're gone. And once they're gone, they won't come back. And even if they're a subscriber, they might subscribe and they look at something that you've done and they think, nah, that guy wasn't that good. That guy wasn't that interesting. I'm not giving that guy my time anymore. And so I can't stress the importance to content creators, to writers, to people like yourself. Get those first 30 seconds, get those first 60 seconds right. Hit someone and make yourself compelling, so that they want to listen, so that they want to keep going. And then, then you can pace things a little bit differently, but straight out of the blocks, bang, hit them. You got to do that.
Well, you're always managing energy levels for yourself. And you kind of have, from what I do, podcasting, speaking to people, from years and years of conversations as a personal trainer or other work I've done previously, you manage how it is that people perceive you, because you can see the reaction in their face. I like to think of it as, if let's say you're out with your mates, or when you're younger, you're out on the pull, or you're dating, you can kind of gauge from someone's reaction what they're feeling about you. You're not reading their thoughts, you don't know exactly what's going on, but you can kind of tell if someone's interested. The body language, the tone of voice, the prosody, everything within their being, you can tell is you've got their attention. Very, very different on camera and over text, but it's the same thing, where for me, the best thing I can do for me is, if something excites me, something interests me, I've got to show that enthusiasm, I've got to show that excitement. And that bounces off back and forth with somebody else. And the more experience you get, just personally with people, you can get that feeling through any kind of conversation. Which is something so many people lack nowadays. So I did a lot of work with children, and I can see straight away how flat they very often tend to be within conversations. Purely because just going from younger ages to teenage years, because of their lack of social interactions person to person. We don't realize at all how much of what we do and what we say and how we respond and communicate with people, and our whole experience is reactionary to other people. And if we don't get that constant feedback, we can't practice and harness that skill, we're going to get shit at it. We will just get worse and worse at it. And people wonder and realize, or people wonder and think, why is are they not happy? Why are they miserable? Why can't they make friends? Or why aren't they getting the response of people that they think they should be getting? And it's because they don't realize their side of things is that they're just out of practice. And whether you're doing it on whatever medium that might be, or even on medium like yourself, it matters. It really matters. And it's not something you need to stress about, but it's at the bare minimum something you should get out there and practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, for a podcaster, you need to listen to other podcasters and see, well, I really love this podcaster. I listen to this podcaster every time he or she puts something out. I'm invested in it. I'm drawn into what he or she's saying. And then you have to ask yourself more from an analytical perspective, why? Why does this person get me every time? Why am I so compelled to listen to this person? Or if it's a YouTuber, they come on and within a minute, you sit there and you drop what you're doing, you stop what you're doing, and you want to watch that person's video, and you say, why does this person get me? And so, I've been teaching in Asia for about 25 years now. And even now, I can go into a classroom with a lesson plan. I think, this lesson is going to be bang up. This is going to be a really good one. I go in there within 5 minutes. I'm looking around the class and these kids are like, this is crap. And I have to assess them, and I have to look at them and think, this isn't working.
So with the lesson planning, and when you come into a lesson, you're expecting it.
Yeah, so sometimes I'll go into a class full of 20, 25 kids, and I think, this is going to be a really good class. I think I've prepared these materials well, and then I'll intro my lesson, and I'll get the kids involved, and then it just falls flat. But I think the really important thing is to look at people and understand this isn't working. And I think you need to be adaptable, and you need to understand, okay, this isn't working. Why? Why isn't this working? What have I done that has fallen flat? Or what have I done differently today that didn't work today that last week I did well? And those things are things that when you're producing things, writing, podcasting, videos, photography, music, whatever, you've got to understand that sometimes things that you think will be good won't necessarily be received as well as you think they will. And sometimes things that you're kind of like blah blah about, sometimes they're received really well and they surprise you. You think, I didn't really think that was that great. Some of the things I've written on Medium, I went into Medium, and the first article I wrote, literally the first article I wrote on Medium, made $2,500 US. And I was like, what? This is insane. And I looked
What was
at
that
article.
Out of curiosity.
The title off the top of my head was something along the lines of 6 things in Japan that might disgust most American people, something like that. I can pull it up on Medium if you want. But 6 socially acceptable things in Japan that might horrify most Americans. So that was the title, 6 socially acceptable things in Japan that might horrify most Americans. And I'm looking at my dashboard now. That article has made $2,663 and had 36,000 views.
So that was your introduction into Medium then. I mean, for me, you often get hooked on those things because of when you get that kind of instant success.
Well, I mean, the thing
especially
with that
financially,
article,
it's like, yeah, what was the thing with that article?
Well, the thing with that article was it was a repurposed article from Quora, right? So I was writing on Quora for a long time, and I had something like 6.5 million views on Quora, and I was making no money because Quora, in around about 2018, Quora said it was going to monetize answers. And Medium had started to monetize answers around about 2017. So I thought, well, Quora is going to be the same as Medium. So I had the following on Quora. I had the readers on Quora. And so I stuck with Quora, thinking that Quora was going to be an equal alternative to Medium. And so I wrote that article initially on Quora, and it got a good response. But Quora, for whatever reason, Quora's partner program, its monetized program, it went nowhere. It literally went nowhere. It never took off. And Mediums just went flying to the moon. So I was like, wow, I've
I,
backed the wrong horse
you know,
here.
when
You
I
know?
found out about the monetization side of things from Medium, I was just instantly blown away with how it works. I've had a few people on the podcast from Medium, just because I like reading articles on Medium. I get a lot of travel stories, people like yourself, and the global. What's the thing called?
Digital
Global
Global Traveler.
Backpackers. That's the one. Digital
Oh,
Global
global.
Travelers, yeah. And I read a lot of that kind of stuff, and I just straight away one of them told me how much they made from. Let's be honest, in terms of what you see generally on kind of homepages and news feeds on like social media video wise, aren't that many views, aren't that many clicks. A friend of mine now who was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. He is currently traveling through the Philippines and has been traveling through Africa via tuk-tuk, took an e-bike through the Philippines, and he is doing that completely funded by his own documentaries and blogs effectively through Medium, as opposed to doing it on his own webpage where it used to be traditional to do your blogs there. Through Medium with the pay barrier, he's now earning more than enough to live a very modest lifestyle wherever he wants in the world. And then to see that,
Yeah.
do you use subreddit? Substack. Sorry.
No, well, it's funny you mention that, is because Medium has, in the last 6 months or so, has changed its algorithms, and so it's becoming harder and harder to get those real, like, home run, high paying articles. The way that they've set it up, um, the, yeah, I don't particularly like it myself, but having said that, I can't complain, because even this year I've had a couple of articles have gone over $1,500 for 2 articles. So when you do get those home runs, they pay really well, because Medium has the number of readers. Medium has the audience. Medium has something like, I think, 40 or 50 million readers. So they have a huge reservoir to dip into. And if you're lucky enough that your article gets selected by the algorithms, however they work, to go out to that reservoir of readers, then you're happy days. You get good payments. Whereas with Substack, you're not drawing upon a huge base of readers. That's not how the payment structure works. With Substack, you are asking people to subscribe to you specifically, and so someone will pay $5 a month and they will get your story specifically, so you're investing in me. So whereas with Medium, someone might not invest in me personally, but they might subscribe to Medium. But if they read my article, then I get a payment from Medium because the member has read my article. So they're a little bit different. But as you touched on, I'm in the process right now of dipping my feet into both Medium and Substack. So I'm trying to get my Substack going, and I'm migrating a lot of my followers from Medium over onto Substack. And I think Substack looks like a more permanent solution compared with Medium, whereas I think Medium looks like more of a high ticket item where you can get, bang, 2,000 hit, and that can tide you over for 3 months of nothing. Whereas Substack, I think, as you build it and build it and build it, it can become a more evergreen type of income. And I'm in the process right now of setting up a Substack and getting my followers on Medium to come over and join me over there, because I think that long term it looks like a more viable option.
Well, you own your own. Yeah, well, so you own your own
Subscribers, your
at that
email
point.
list.
So it's all yours. You haven't got to worry necessarily about anything else.
No, well, the problem with every social media site, they all work the same in the end. Is that, I'm a photographer by trade. I write for F-Stoppers, which is one of the biggest photography websites in the world, or on the internet, sorry. And I do a lot of photography work. I teach photography at the university. And so I was on Instagram from the early days, and through my color for Instagram webs profile and my black and white profile, I built up to about 60,000 followers. And so through both of those accounts, I was able to monetize those accounts. I was able to monetize them through selling prints, through selling how-to videos, through selling how-to guides, through workshops and whatnot. And the way that Instagram worked in the early days was that every time I posted something, I got huge audience numbers. I had 30,000 followers on one account, 30,000 followers on another account, and 40 to 50% of my followers would see everything I posted. And then suddenly Instagram changed the algorithm, and those 50%, it went down to 10%, down to 8%, down to 6%, down to 1%. So in the end, I was posting things to all the followers that had followed me over the years, and barely 300 people were seeing them. I had 30,000 followers and 300 people were seeing my posts, right? And so we go back to what I said earlier about intrinsic, extrinsic motivations. And once I saw that on Instagram and that they were going towards videos and reels and trying to compete with Snapchat and TikTok and things like that, I just said, no, I'm not going to play this game anymore with Instagram. And so you go to my Instagram now and there's still 28,000 followers on both accounts, I think, but I haven't posted anything in years. It's just not worth my time. I have the followers, but Instagram doesn't show anything that I post to the followers. So there's no point. It's just a number. It's an arbitrary number that doesn't mean anything for me. And so
Well,
then I went
that's
over.
kind of the way it works now. I actually really like especially when it comes to Instagram and YouTube, and the way that it pumps media out to people. Where yes, originally the subscribers being, if you have those subscribers, they're going to see everything through their sub list and yada 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 yada. But it almost goes back to what we were saying before with the Japanese way of you getting more and having that sort of compound interest over time, years and years and years, where you get respected for the time you've put in and the effort you've got. By having that subscriber base, you almost don't have to worry about your content anymore because you've got that subscriber base. However, it's all now because of those algorithms being so intelligent. It is very much a meritocracy. Everything you post, every bit of content, and it's a lot maybe more difficult now on Instagram and YouTube, Instagram especially because it's just photos for the most part, except for Reels. YouTube as well, and then even with your writing, like you say on Medium, you've got to be really punchy. You've got to get people involved and have them interested straight away, because it no longer matters whether or not you've got a history of great content. It now matters that you can continuously create good, meaningful, worthwhile stuff that people want to consume.
Yeah, I mean, I think any time you're at the whims of social media algorithms, you're in danger of losing everything that you've built at the drop of a hat. It can happen overnight, and it's happened to me, to thousands of my friends, to my photographer friends. I've got photographer friends who had hundreds of thousands of followers who their sole income was Instagram. They quit their jobs, they quit their safety net, their full-time employment to be Instagrammers, to create work on Instagram, to teach their followers, to go and photograph things and talk about their photography and teach people on Instagram about photography. And all of a sudden these algorithms changed, bang, they lost their entire livelihoods. And I think that anytime you're at the whims of algorithms and computer programs changing things depending on what's hot and what's not, in terms of, like, I'm a photographer, so that's still images. I'm not a videographer. I don't do video. That's not out of stubbornness or anything like that. I'm just not really that interested in video. And so still images were the foundation of Instagram, and now it's changed to try to compete with YouTube and Snapchat and TikTok, and it's become about reels and short videos. And so still image photographers, they've just been left by the wayside. And so for me, Instagram, there's no return on investment when you talk about ROI being time. Time is money, time putting in, and I'm not getting anything out. And so that I left Instagram and I left all those followers and I went over to Medium, and unfortunately, in the last 6 to 8 months or whatever, Medium has gone that way of being algorithm driven. And it's not, I don't think it's quality driven anymore. It's algorithm driven, and a lot of people are playing that algorithm game. And I don't want to play that game anymore. I'm old enough and I've been around enough and old and grizzled enough that I don't want to play that game. And I think that currently, it could change. Who knows the future? But currently, Substack doesn't play that algorithm game. You build your subscriber list. They are yours to keep. They're your email list. They're your people. You write something, you send it to them. They get it. They read it. You get paid. And I like that. Even though it's harder to build them because you have to do all the work to build those individuals one by one, rather than having an audience pool that Medium, for example, sends out, and you might get lucky, as I did. We know with a number of articles that went $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, whatever. I got lucky and I'm happy. I never complain about Medium because I'm one of the very few that got that kind of remuneration from that platform. But having said that, I don't want to play the Medium game. I don't want to play that algorithm game. And so I'm kind of in that process now of going to a system where I can hopefully trust that it'll be more consistent with what you see is what you get, rather than trying to second guess yourself and second guess what they want and what other people want. I think that is difficult for content creators across the board. YouTubers, podcasters, music creators, whatever. When you're at the whims of algorithms, I think it's always a slippery slope, and you have to be adaptable. And in the end, you just get tired of adapting, I think, unless you're able to continuously do it.
The way I look at it and I see it is, you're exactly right. You get tired of playing that algorithm game. You don't want to be playing that algorithm game. And the worst part of it is that, as you say, it's flittering. It's temporary, because if you're basically learning how to do an algorithm, you're not practicing your own skill. You're not getting better at the thing that you started and you wanted to do. Let's say you're writing. You're not developing your writing. You're developing your writing in a style which is now marketable. Same with the video content creation. There's so many people who are making short reels or TikTok dances, as opposed to making good, meaningful documentary, maybe style or cinematic style content, because it's a very long learning curve to create a novel, to create a documentary, to create a film. Because you can create loads of short content and you're going to make something from that. But if you're doing long form content, it might take you 6 months to a year, plus 5 years, 10 years for certain things. Any great piece of art throughout human history has taken decades. We don't get that anymore, and you don't get that practice at those things anymore. It's not appreciated, it's not warranted, it's not justified financially, like you say, and it's very frustrating. Whenever you can strip it back to those core values and those core semblances of what you can provide to people, the better. And I'd be amiss before you go to not ask you, with your experience of writing within English language and content creating itself, what were some of the top things you'd recommend to anybody who's looking at getting into this area now to make it sustainable long term and to do the best within themselves?
I think it's not just writing. I think writing is one form of production. When we talk about language, when we talk about learning languages or any kind of languages, we have 4 skills, right? We have 2 receptive skills, 2 productive skills. Receptive skills is coming in, which is reading and listening. So they're things that are coming into our brains. And then we have the productive side of things, which is writing and speaking. They're coming out, so we have 2 things in, 2 things out. They're the four skills of any language. And so when you're looking at becoming better at whatever you're doing, whether it's podcasting, writing, any of the creative side of things, you have to be active on both sides. You have to be on the receptive side. So for a writer, you need to be reading. You need to be reading. If you're a short story writer, you need to be reading short stories. If you want to be a successful blogger or a successful person on Medium or whatever, you need to be reading things on Medium that are successful. And I think don't read anything. You have to be judicious in what you're listening to or what you're reading. You need to look at what's successful, because
Iron
as we
sharpens
just
iron.
talked to, as we talked about with algorithms, things are always changing. And if you genuinely want to make money with things, you have to sometimes make sacrifices on what you love. If what you love is not resonating or is not popular with the general populace, then you've got to take a step back and say, hey, I love writing about this, or I love producing content about this, but it's not what people want. It's not what people are listening to or reading or interested in. And so you have to adapt in the sense of being flexible enough or self-aware enough to create things that you like, but are also attractive to people. So for example, to give you specific examples, like I live in Japan, right? People are obsessed with Japan. People love Japan. They're obsessed with geisha. They're obsessed with samurai. They're obsessed with ninja. They're obsessed with sushi. They're obsessed with manners and etiquette and all of the things, and kimono and all of the things that go with Japan. And so that's what I write about. There are things in Japan that I absolutely love. Chopstick rules are absolutely fascinating to me. But people don't, people are not necessarily going to read chopstick rules. My thesis and my treatise on how to sit at a table and handle your chopsticks probably won't get me a $4,000 article. Whereas if I write something about the Yakuza, the Japanese the mafia, or I write about someone getting their little finger chopped off because they did the wrong thing at a horse racing event, then people are going to read that. It's still Japan. They're both related to Japan. One's about chopsticks. One's about the Yakuza and horse racing and fingers cut off. Which one do you think people are most interested in? So sometimes you have to be a bit adaptable about what you want to create and what people want to listen to or read. And then you have to find some kind of middle ground. And then after that, I think you have to hone your skills. As we talked about before, like hard work. Like I talk about writing, and it might not mean things to your readers, but things like, let's say, alliteration. A, B, 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 C, 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 putting words together that start with the same sound. Cat, can, can't. K, 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 something like that. Anaphora, epistrophe. Starting words or starting sentences with the same words. I don't like that. I don't do this. I don't understand that. I don't. Or epistrophe, start ending sentences with the same kind of words, things like that. People appreciate that without even knowing what it is. They're little techniques that when people are reading it, they don't know what they are, but they have an impact on the reader where someone says, hey, I really like this guy's writing style. I really like the way that this guy's writing kind of gets inside my head. He has a way of putting words onto the paper that I haven't really found before. It's different from other people. And so you start to find your own style by using tried and tested techniques, but they're techniques that work that other people don't necessarily know. So if you're podcasting, you don't just sit in front of a camera and start talking. You have certain techniques that you need to use. You have pacing. You sometimes you use long sentences. Sometimes you use one or two word sentences that are like staccato, like bang, 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 bang. And then people are like, oh, you don't lull people to sleep with sentences that are same length all the time, or the tone of your voice isn't just this monotone flat thing. You got to go up, you got to go down, you've got to hit people so that you keep them engaged. And I think that with writing, with creating any kind of content, you need to understand techniques, and to understand techniques, you've got to study them, you've got to practice them, you've got to write them, you've got to read them, you've got to look at the best and what they're doing, and pull them apart and analyze them, and then put them into your own content so that you become better, and then you start to develop your own style. People talk about your own voice, and I think that voice, people don't really understand what that means, but I think it's, how do you want to be heard? How do you want to be read? How do you want people to think about you? So when people read me, they know that they're going to get sentences that are 25 words long, followed by a sentence that's 2 words long. It's going to be bang, 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 followed by some long flowing thing. And it's, I think, a lot of contrast, a lot of variety, a lot of different techniques. I think you really need to study what goes into the craft to make it better for the receiver. Because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, the receiver is the person that's going to pay you, whether it's through subscription, whether it's through views, whether it's through some kind of membership. The person that you're presenting to, they're the customer. You're the producer. The customer is going to pay you. What are you doing to produce content that people want? And in terms of writing, specifically to writing, I think that you need to understand different techniques, especially sentence length, paragraph length, and not waffling. Get to the point. Don't go round and round in circles so that you've written 200 words without saying anything. Don't describe something with waffle and purple prose if it's not telling anyone anything that they need to hear, because people get bored. Don't let people get bored. That's probably my biggest piece of advice for content creators. Don't let people get bored.
I love it. It's it touches on a lot of things that I, for myself, you kind of pick up. And again, that skill you've harnessed within your own writing and mastering these techniques through reading them. As you say, the 2 senses in, the 2 we have coming out as well, using those together. And actually being observant and being a student continuously to improve yourself. And that I absolutely love. And it's something we all need to hear, myself included, from time to time, because you can get caught in that drog over and over, not seeing difference, that kind of feeling like you're going crazy because you're expecting different results and you just don't really know what you're doing wrong. And that's the one thing, if there's one thing I can add to what you've just said, because I couldn't have put anything you've just said better than you have with your experience and knowledge and wisdom on that. The one thing I've found for myself, which plays into all those things massively, especially with what I do with speaking and in podcasting, is passion. And it's all, for me, it always has to have that passion, because you can't, unless you're a great actor and you've got a script and you can fake or put yourself in that persona of what you're trying to convey, that expression. It's expression of how you feel inside. And when you have that passion, any good writer, any good podcaster, any good artist can very articulately or very artistically put out what's in here and what's in here out into the world. And that is something I've always found resonates with me when I hear it from somebody else. Like a preacher standing at the top, saying his sermon, speaking to people from his heart, from his chest. It's like it's coming from the gods. People listen because you mean what you say. You say what you want to say. Like you said yourself, it's knowing or finding your own voice and using it how you want to. There's a lot of things that go into that, which you've got to learn and practice. But if you can't speak for yourself, well, speak for yourself, write for yourself, portray yourself, express yourself how you feel, and have passionate enough feelings about what you feel, no one's going to listen. No one's going to care.
And one thing to add to that, I think that's really important, which I didn't say, is you have to be honest. You have to be absolutely honest. Even if it means people disagree with you, you have to get people to disagree with you. My most popular articles, ones that have had 15,000 likes or 10,000 likes or however many, within those likes and within those positive comments, I get a bunch of people saying, this was crap. You're talking a load of crap. This is wrong. There's a lot of haters out there, but that's good. You need to get people feeling something enough to comment. If people are so blasé and so disinterested and so indifferent about what you're creating that they don't even bother to get on there and comment on something, then you're doing something wrong. I mean, I don't mean to create something deliberately inflammatory. Don't do that. Don't try to be deliberately controversial. Write what you want to write. Talk about what you want to talk about. But don't be afraid of having an opinion. You need opinions. Without an opinion, you're just a leaf on a tree blowing in the wind. No one cares. You need to have some kind of position, whether it's right wing, left wing. But if you have a position, have good reasoning. There's no right or wrong with opinions. Opinions are just a thought. They're nothing more than thoughts, but you need to have good reasons. I never dismiss anyone's opinion, even if I disagree with it, as long as they have good reasoning. I think A, because 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's fair enough. That's valid. I disagree, but you've got valid reasons. And don't be afraid of putting your reasons out there, because without reasons and without opinions and without like strong thoughts on any particular subject, no one's going to listen. No one's going to read, because people want to be engaged. People want to be captivated. And the way to captivate people is to have an opinion, to have a strong feeling about something, because strong feelings, as you just said, is passion. I have strong feelings about certain things, and I'll say them, and I don't care if people disagree with them. As long as you present something as a valid response to me, then I will accept it. Absolutely. And that's the way that you get followers. Even I've got followers who follow everything that I write, who disagree with everything that I say, but they still write. They still write to me, and they still read what I say, because they're interested. They're interested in Japan. They're interested in life in Japan. They're interested in being an expat. It might be an English person thinking of relocating to Spain, or an English person relocating to Italy, or wherever. They're looking at the expat life, and they might disagree with things that I say as an Australian expat in Japan, but there's still things that they can relate to. There's still things that they can write about and think about and be cognizant of. And so you have to put something of yourself onto the page or onto the screen or into your videos. Otherwise, you just get lost in the noise.
You do. Thank you, Iain. Thank you so much for coming on, speaking to us.
Thank you.
Love a lot of the stuff you do, reading all the stuff you've done. And originally I wanted to get on talking about a lot of the Japanese stuff, because that caught my eyes as well. It's something I'm interested and curious about and want to explore. But seeing where that passion fell and where it follows through your voice, what you're saying and what you want to speak about, I'm so glad it went where it went. So thank you very much for spending your time with us.
No problem.
I hope you have a great rest of your day. And
do a part 2 on Japan sometime.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to.
No problem.
We'll make it happen. But Iain, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bailey. Good luck. Have fun in
Awesome.
Australia.
Bye, everyone.